Welcome back to the second part of our presentation. We will discuss the role we had to play in Melusi in 2024. All of the work the honor students have participated in is based on the Max Neef's matrix of human needs. Before proceeding, it's important to remember the games were developed using Max Neef's matrix of human needs. We went to Melusi to carry out the fieldwork, namely playing the games and recording the answers. The games were played at 5 different stations identified by senior researchers and field workers who are familiar with Melusi. This included Mido, one of the partners, the church located on the main road, Pulla Park, which is a soccer ground and gathering space, the tavern, a recreational gathering space and hub for taxis, and the eastern entrance to Melusi that has a constant flow of people coming and going. On day 1, the games were stationed as follows: drawing at Mido, making at the church, building blocks at Pulla Park, and the matrix game at the tavern and playing near the east entrance. On day 2, the games were stationed as follows: the making game at Mido, the matrix game at the church, the playing game at Pulla Park, and the drawing game at the tavern. The building blocks game was near the east entrance. Day 3, there was a bit of shuffling done in regards to where the games were played, due to issues that will be explained in the detailing of the games. The matrix game was at Mido, playing game moved along the same street as Mido, and the drawing game moved to the clinic across from Mido. Building blocks went to the tavern, and making went to Pulla Park. Over the next 3 slides, we will look at how the participants' pool was spread across the different games over 3 days. Day 1 had a total of 115 participants. It was sunny and 32 degrees Celsius. Day 2 had a total of 94 participants. It was sunny and 34 degrees Celsius. Day 3 had a total of 112 participants. It was cloudy and 31 degrees Celsius. Next, we will move on to the demographics of our participants. This gives additional context to how the games ran. It is important to understand that there were limitations when we played the games, namely the age group being 18 plus, employment demographics of mostly self or unemployed participants, only having able-bodied participants, and contact time being limited, and there was no method behind which questions were asked. Looking at gender demographics, we see a majority of participants were female, taking up 55%. Age-wise, majority of our participants were between 21 and 30, taking up 44%. Our overall range varied from under 20 up to over 60. Employment-wise, majority of the participants were unemployed, which were expected as we played the games during working hours. Some were employed full-time or part-time. Lastly, we asked participants if they were willing to participate. This statistic is important as this data was collected after the consent forms were signed, yet some participants still answered that they were unwilling. Now we will look at how the individual games were played in detail, and the process of how they were being played in the field.
First game to encourage participation in answering questions based on the matrix of human needs was the building blocks game, a game based on Jenga. The team consists of master students, senior researcher, 3 honor students, an intern, and 3 community field researchers, each with their own respective roles. So why was Jenga used? It's the familiarity of Jenga that makes participants eager to play, a game that's simple, easy, and well-known to many. This promotes participation through which positive engagement is ensured. The proposed questions turns the game into a conversation starter. In order to play the game, a Jenga tower is needed along with a pen and paper for documentation. The Jenga tower is constructed, and one by one, each participant removes a block and reads out loud the phrase or word on the chosen block. This prompts a question based on Max Neef's matrix. This game was intended to be played along with the roots and symptoms tree, in which the chosen block from Jenga is placed on the trunk of a tree and a question is asked in such a way to identify the root problem. Each member will write down the root problem identified and place this on the poster. After this, the same process is followed to identify symptoms. The games were played at 5 different stations identified by senior researchers and field workers who are familiar with Melusi. On our first day, we were stationed at Pulla Park, which is a recreational area in Melusi 3. This station was the furthest west of all the stations, and due to its location on two busy routes, we got many participants for our game. A few friend groups got involved together, and all participants were respectful to one another. They often added points to what others were saying in a discussion. The game itself ran smoothly, and all participants were eager to keep playing, perhaps due to its challenging nature. A change was made to the original plan of the game in not including the symptoms tree discussion because discussions ran longer than expected. Also, participants seemed interested in the Jenga part of the game, so we wanted to capitalize on that interest while saving time. On the second day, we were initially stationed at the east entrance at Station 5. On this day, however, there was a memorial service being held in which one of the nearby members, which greatly influenced the mood and participation. Because of this, we moved to another station at the nursery near Mado to attempt to get more participation. We had very long discussions on this day, but overall participation dropped to 7 participants. With the theme of the day being impediments, the responses were generally more restrained. Overall, the game ran efficiently despite lower participation, and the lower number of participants allowed for very long interaction times. On the third day, we were stationed at Station 4, which was a tavern for the previous 2 days. But on this day, we decided to move a bit further west up the street to a station outside of a local shop. Back in a busy zone without unforeseen influences, we once again got 14 participants. The subject of utopia for this day was interesting because the questions asking for an ideal world would often result in answers in which people would simply want basic services and infrastructure. This is an observation which will be further discussed in the matrix analysis and focus group stage. The overall positive and negative aspects of the game which I have discussed ultimately result in a net positive game structure and overall research endeavor. A pattern which was noticed was that during this game, the random system by which questions were asked resulted in not all questions on the matrix being asked. As seen in these diagrams indicating which questions were asked and how often, you can see some questions were asked up to 3 times, others were not asked at all. However, because we believe that this still allowed us to get a comprehensive understanding of their needs, because the longer discussions we facilitated covered many of the topics, regardless of having specifically asked corresponding questions.
Second game is a drawing game. Our team consisted of the following: a senior researcher, master student, honor students, interns, and community field researchers. The game requires people to draw or write in response to our questions. However, the flashcards were not included when we asked the questions. Through reading Max Neef's Human Scale Development, Clay Cooper Marcus's House as a Mirror of Self, exploring the deeper meaning of self and Hamdi, we discovered that this game will promote open dialogue with the community through self-expression. Additional changes were made to the questions so that they were understandable, which made it easier for people to draw as a response. Day 1. We were stationed at Mido where questions about satisfiers were asked. On this day, we noted people were eager to openly express the current disruptors of their environment, and the drawing game assisted in achieving engagement with the community so that they would understand the environment better. On this day, we identified numerous people's reliance on Mido to improve themselves and how essential Mido is in assisting in the improvement of the employment issues so that they could sustain their households or attain a better home for their families. Day 2. We were supposed to be stationed around the spaza shop next to the tavern. On this day, we asked questions relating to the impediments in people's lives. We observed people assisting each other in expressing their experiences through the drawings. Thereafter, conversations and debates regarding people's personal issues, community issues, were articulated, which resulted in people learning and understanding each other. This spoke to the objectives that Hamdi and Maxnium aimed for us to achieve. However, there were points during the day that non-participants expressed that weight of the question seemed too trivial to just draw, and the participants felt uncomfortable sharing such vulnerable responses in a group. They also felt excluded from the community in terms of communication outside social groups, which spoke to the level of trust among the community. Day 3. We were stationed in front of the clinic, where questions related to utopia were asked. On this day, we were able to acknowledge people's aspirations, and ambitions regarding their community. Many people noted what opportunities and skill provisions can be implemented by the community. But the aspirations seem to remind them of the lack of facilitation and safety in terms of where they can implement the ideas within the community. Looking at the drawings, we were able to decode the true meaning behind the images, relating to the lived experience of the people in Melusi as seen on the slides. We noted that the faces don't always have smiles. This might indicate that people are not happy. Another observation were the handless drawings, which might indicate people feeling helpless. We recognize that the physical things make people happy and that worth is emphasized through possession. In terms of community, people always connected answers in relation to places or other people. Living at a place which speaks to the collectivistic culture, this shows that people were not truly alone, which is obvious in the culture. Overall, we were able to understand that people recognize the reality and the ways that it can be changed. They have ambitions for their community and are open to having more communication among each other. However, there is a huge lack of trust in the area, and the minimal facilitation for their needs seem to deter the community from starting to create opportunities for themselves within the environment.
So the third game is the making game. Our team consisted of a master's student, a senior researcher, honors students, interns, and community field researchers. Based on Hamdi's framework of placemaking, he states that by analyzing pictures in games, we reveal how people view themselves and others. He argues that activities like mapping and modeling empower people to be co-creators, fostering ownership and leading to more inclusive places and programs. The making game was divided into two sections, the vision board and the model making. For the vision board, participants had to cut out pictures, creating a collage, then reflect on their own creation. While for the mapping and modeling game, a series of visual tools such as maps, stickers, and modeling clay were used by the participants to visually communicate their specific circumstances in relation to the questions that were asked. For day one, we were stationed at the church. While there, we focused on the theme of satisfiers. Our initial attempt to have participants create collage for themselves resulted in time constraints, forcing us to change our game approach. The team then had to make the vision board before taking in more participants. The revised approach resulted in more timely and meaningful interactions with a diverse group of participants who are mostly self-employed. The making games were quite popular and attracted people in pairs at some instances. This yielded fruitful results, and were able to discover emerging patterns such as diverse income streams and a general appreciation of communal spaces within Melusi. For day two, we were located at Maido. The focus was on impediments, and we had interacted with a number of participants. This is because Maido, being a communal space, presents an excellent opportunity to meet these community members. This day aimed to identify barriers to their goals. The interviews revealed self-esteem issues among young adults due to community criticism, favoritism, and xenophobic patterns that hindered their participation in community activities. Despite the good turnout, several participants struggled, but were eventually able to visually communicate their ideas. This called for a change in the game approach, from guiding participants to allowing them express themselves more visually. For day three, we were stationed at Polar Park, and our focus was on the utopian side of things. We noticed that the community members here were mostly unemployed but had very brilliant aspirations and dreams for their community, their neighborhood, but the recurring inability to exploit these opportunities still held them back. So despite the brilliant aspirations that arose, we also noticed that there were other participants who held preconceived biases about the notion that playing of games is for children. This could be loosely translated as one's inability to communicate visually rather than the stated biases, which we hope to uncover in the next phase of the focus groups. In summary, the game revealed hidden aspirations and patterns within Melusi, but preconceived biases about identity still persist and are negatively impacting community.
Our group used playing soccer as a data gathering tool. We consisted of honor students, interns, and community field researchers, each with our own respective roles during the needs gathering process. This is just an image showing our team. The reason our game is based on soccer is because it's a very popular sport in Africa and would therefore reach a great amount of participants in Melusi. The International Committee of the Red Cross are actually investigating the positive social impacts that football programs and informal settlements have on the youth in communities. It is therefore a relevant tool for investigating in Melusi as well. Our game requires the following items and is set up in these 5 steps. Our game consists of 2 parts, the soccer shootout and the pass the ball game. Starting with part 1, which is the soccer shootout. The soccer shootout starts with the participant lining up the ball and aiming for a corner in the goal post. Once the ball lands in one of the 4 corners, a question that corresponds to that corner is asked. The second part is pass the ball. In the pass the ball game, 2 or more players are gathered in a circle. The interviewer prompts a question and then passes the ball to one of the participants. The participant who catches the ball must then answer the question and pass the ball to another participant. On day 1, we were stationed next to a shebeen at the east entrance. Many of the members that we encountered were drinking and spoke incoherently or slurred their words, which made it difficult to engage with them. Quite a few members of Melusi love soccer and were therefore enthusiastic to participate in our game. The passing game changed to only 1 to 2 participants at a time, as they were more comfortable sharing in this setting. Our overall contact time was less than 20 minutes per game. On day 2, we were stationed next to a spaza-shop/beer garden and close to the local soccer field. We had a lot of shade, which we noticed had encouraged participants to linger at our station for longer. We noticed again a lot of interest in our soccer games. People kept encouraging their friends to join by yelling funny catchphrases about the Kaiser Chiefs, which made it a fun and interactive experience for participants. We adjusted our game to ask 2 or more questions per participant. We also had to start randomly selecting questions from categories for the shootout game, since most participants kicked it into the bottom 2 corners most of the time. On day 3, we were stationed close to Mida on the edge of the tree nursery. We were next to a car wash and a transport node, and there were many members of the community walking past on their way to or from the taxi point. Because of where we were stationed, we had a lot of people of different backgrounds, education, and nationalities. We had many participants joining at once. Therefore, we split the participants between the 2 games so we don't lose them due to loss of interest. We asked each participant 2 or more questions. One of the biggest lessons we learned was that Melusi has a vibrant and heterogeneous culture and that it would be unfair to make assumptions at face value, which is why we would need to further investigate our findings and make the process replicable for future investigations. The game was successful at engaging the community and breaking down barriers between the researchers and the participants and reached a larger sample in a short amount of time. Our contact time on our negative side was shorter than what other games allowed, which meant we didn't get to rigorously unpack some of the questions as much as we would have liked.
Hi everyone, we are the final game, the Matrix board. The team consisted of a master's student, 2 senior researchers, 2 honors students, 1 intern, and 4 community field researchers. Our game was a board game where teams would roll a dice, land on a color, and answer a question that corresponds to that color. These questions were all based on Max Neef's matrix of human needs. On day 1, we were located by Station 4, the tavern, and had 17 participants throughout this day. On this day, we had no difficulty finding participants. Everyone was excited to see what was set up under the Urban Citizen Studio gazebo. The process of having the consent form signed and the Survey 123 being completed slowed down the process a lot, but once the game started, everyone was eager to see who would win. The tavern was lively and our busiest of the 3 days. We, with the help of our community field researchers, were able to run 3 games throughout the day, uncovering stories and information based on the positive aspects of Melusi that people were willing to share. A lot of participants praised Melusi as safe and a welcoming community, as well as boasting about their business opportunities. Although there were some negative answers, but these usually came when a participant spoke to one of the team members by the map or after their turn was over. On day 2, we were located by Station 2, by the church. We had 9 participants throughout the day. On this day, we initially struggled with finding people to play, but our engagements were extremely interesting, and we coordinated 2 games, one with 3 teams of 2 and then an adjusted game of 3 people, each playing for themselves but answering the questions together. On the day, we had the chance to speak to 3 women who came to Melusi from Zimbabwe. It turned into a meaningful conversation about their struggles with xenophobia, single motherhood, unemployment, and their worries for the future of their children. On day 3, we were located by Station 1, outside of Mido. We had 16 participants. Our 16 participants expressed their dreams and ideal views of what they want to see from Melusi in the future. Engagements were constructive and people shared similar aspirations for their community. Except for one outlier, a woman who was insanely passionate about soccer, even going so far as to say Melusi should be one large soccer field. Mido was a busy station for us. On this day, we adjusted the game depending on the number of participants, ranging from a one-on-one questionnaire to friends playing against each other to having team versus team. This helped us gather a variety of information. One of our community field researchers, Supras Maleko, ranked his utopian needs for us and explained it with a story. He said, "I need freedom so that I can show affection. I need affection so that I can understand people. I need understanding so that I can be creative. I need creation so that I can protect my community. I need protection so that I can participate in music. I need participation as a musician to show my identity. I need my identity as a musician for subsistence. And I need subsistence so I can be idle." After our 3 days, we were able to identify a few positives, negatives, and patterns seen throughout our time in Melusi. Our positives included the appreciation for our community field researchers and how they were key to the success of our game. The community was welcoming and seemed to enjoy their engagements with the game. The engagements also often extended outside of the game, conversations while working at the map or conversations after the games had already ended. The negatives or places we could have improved included the game was sometimes long and limited the amount of participants we could engage with. We also feel people were limited with what they would share during the games due to the size of the groups. The translators were key, but the language barriers could sometimes result in inaccurate results when dealing with the questions and answers of the game. And then some of the patterns we experienced over the 3 days included that women were more willing to share their experiences. Sometimes people relied on their partner when playing in pairs. And we also found that the smaller the participant group, the more engaging the game and answers became. In total, over our 3 days across the 5 games, we had 308 points of information that need to be consolidated. We then move on to part 3 of our presentation, and what is next really is analyzing the data that we've been able to gather throughout our time in Melusi playing the 5 games. Then we look into developing the questions for our focus groups, and finally, in our subgroups, we look at developing bridges to synergistically satisfy the needs of the community through the axiological needs identified by Max Neef.